Hello and Assalamualaikum everyone. In this tutorial, I am going to explain about function. I believe you have learned this during algorithm and programming course. So this is just a revision of what you have learned previously. Before we proceed to go deep on learning data structure. What is function? What do you understand by function? In previous programming, I believe that you have write long line of codes, and this is reflect with top-down programming concept. However, it could be a very tedious process if you are facing with errors in your programs, in which you have to find from lines to lines to find the errors. However, we can simplify our programs using modular programming, in which to implement module programming in our programs, we have to use function. With function, we can separate codes into particular or specific tasks, and we can reuse it again and again. So there are several steps for us to create function in our programs. So the steps includes, first we need to declare and define function. Okay, how we can declare and define function? It is based on this syntax. Just like how you create or how you write identifiers in your program. So we are following the identifiers rules. So with function, we started with write the data type. Data type for the function and followed by the function name. And don't forget to put bracket at the end of the function. So this is how we can differentiate from function from another identifiers, because sometimes this function could have because we are following the same rules for creating identifiers in a program. So to differentiate variables with function, the difference is in terms of this bracket. In function, we have to put this bracket at the end of the function name. There are 4 types of function you can create in C program or in another programming languages, depending on the requirements. So let us take a look into these several types of function. The first types of function is that it will not return a value or receive values. Secondly, function that will not return a value but will receive values, more than one values with it. And function that will return a value but will not receive values. And the last one, type of function that will return a value and receive values. So how we can differentiate and how we can use this function in our program, depending on the requirements. So let us take a look what is meant by not return or return a value or receive values or will not receive values. Let us work with this. So with this first type of function, what is meant by not return a value or receive a value? We can relate this with the syntax. Okay, data type shows that whether this function will return or not returning a value. Okay, so if we write this void, means that this function, the function that we are going to create will not return a value. Void means empty. Okay, meaning that this function will not return any values. Okay, and followed by the function name. So how we can create the function name? According to the according to the identifiers rules and the regulation of how creation. Okay, so in this case, let's say we work on function to add 2 numbers. Let's say we create here this function to add 2 numbers, but based on this type of function that will not return a value or receive a value. So means that it's a void function, and let's say we give names to this function as add numbers. Okay, this is the function name, and will not receive any value. So if this function, the function that we are going to create, will not receive any values, means that okay, we just left the bracket empty. Okay, so this is how we can create it. Okay, number 1. So this is the first type of function. Will not return any values, or will not return a value or receive value. So if we look, we found that the function, the data type for the function is void, and there is no or the bracket is empty, then we know that this is a function that will not return a value or receive a value. Okay, so this is the syntax. Okay, just focus on the syntax first. And then how about function that will not return a value but will receive a value? Okay, using the first example, okay, so we can differentiate that this function will not return a value, void, but will receive values. So means that this function will receive a value. So where do we know that whether it will receive a value or not? Look at the bracket. Okay, if inside the bracket there is parameters, okay, we call it parameter or arguments. Okay, if there is arguments or parameters inside these brackets, then this function will receive values and will be used in the function. So what is parameter or argument? Anything inside this bracket, we refer it as parameters or argument. Okay, parameters and arguments are similarly to variables concept, in which we will have return type, and it will have data types, and it will also have the names, identifying names. It really representing the data that we will receive. Okay, for example, let's say here we work with A, and let's say we have two parameters here. First is integer A, and second is integer B, because we create this function for to add two numbers. So means that here we need two values to be added in this process, in the next process inside this add numbers. So how we do know that what types of data it will receive? It is depending on the identifiers or the data that we will send. So at first we just assume that this function will receive two integer values to be added in the implemented in this function. Okay, so this is how we write the syntax for these types of function. Okay, and how about function that will return a value but will not receive any values? Okay, just use the similar concept, similar syntax, but this time it seems that this function will return a value, so it no longer void. Okay, instead we will need to replace with the other data type. Okay, so in this example, it seems that we will work with integer, so we assume that this function will return an integer value, and you have to bear in mind that at the moment a function can only return one value at a time, but it can receive more than one value at a time. So therefore, when you creating the functioning, you can only put one data type in front, based on the concept that a function can only return a value, not values at a time. Satu saja nilai yang boleh dipulangkan pada satu masa. Tetapi can receive more than one. Okay, so this function, the third types of function, the third types is this function will return value but will not receive value. Means this is what this means. It will return. So if a function will return a value, means that inside this function we have to write a return keyword and it will return a value here later on. We will work on this. Okay, so this is the syntax. Okay, and will not receive value, meaning that in the bracket will not receive a value. Nothing will be accepted inside the bracket. Let's assume bracket is our hands, means kosong, tak ada apa yang akan kita dapat. Okay, and function that will return, the third type is function that will return a value and receive value, means it can be no longer empty. Instead, it will receive value. So assume that it will receive two integer values. Okay, if you look at this example, we are using parameters A and B. So can we use another name? Boleh, tak ada masalah. As long as the data types that we use here are similar. Okay, we can use another, we can create another, whatever names given to this parameter. Okay, so parameters and argument are actually just like variables, but somehow these parameter and arguments are can be used within this function, or we can refer it as local, only recognized within this region or this function. Okay, then it seems that this function will return a value, so we have to use the return keywords inside this function. So is there any difference when we create or when we use define different function according to the types of its type? Of course, there will different impacts or implementation inside our function. Okay, so hopefully you really understood this syntax. Then we will next focus on how we will write the implementation of the function based on the types of function. Okay, so before we proceed with defining the task for each function, for the function that we have created, let us declare variables that we will use with the function. In this case, let's assume that we will need to know or to get two numbers before we can add the numbers. So let's say we have first number and we have second number. Okay, means that we will receive two numbers and we will get the numbers from users. So we write input statement. Okay, it seems that it is an integer, then use percent and first number, just replace the first variables. Set the first variable for the number. Okay, done with the statements to get obtain first numbers and replace with second number and replace with this with second number. Okay, this is it. Once we have done with the input statement, now we will define a task for this function, these several types of function that we have here. Okay, actually we can in a program we can use any types of